We'll now hear from Patrick Murray showing the rise and fall of civilizations and how they all connect.
Howdy, my name is Patrick, and let's just cut to the chase. Civilizations, they're all around us, above and below as well. But how do these seemingly natural phenomena happen? How do they collapse? Can the rise and fall of civilizations be described with a yellow scale with a bunch of red boxes underneath it? Well, if you would direct your attention to the screen behind me, you would see just such a mess of things. But more of that later. When I first decided to write a speech on this vast topic, I tried to come up with a working model of how a given group can be formed, flourish, and then eventually fail. The first step to getting such a mathematical model was a definition of what a civilization is. A few of the things I researched were definitions like a dominant community, or a group with shared beliefs supported by language. These were all logical and straightforward answers, but if I wanted logical and straightforward, I would be a politician. Just kidding. So then, none of the mainstream definitions would work for the model that I needed to build, so my next move was obvious. Over the next month or so, I built my own. I mean, how hard could it be? Well, after weeks of agonizing deliberation, I came up with this. A healthy civilization is a community that is always growing and changing culturally and economically, but never overexerts itself or oversteps its bounds. And that worked. I could start making progress, writing, arguing, the works. But then I realized that in my genius, I had come up with my own logical and straightforward answer. So with a month's work wasted, I marched on, trying to come up with yet another definition. But I ran into a little bit of a problem. There is no second definition. Civilizations don't do definitions. There is, however, a yellow scale with red boxes underneath it. And oh look, there it is. Time for explaining. This scale is what one gets when they extrapolate 23 words, the definition, into an understandable visual. Look at it this way. Every civilization is a balance. This scale represents that, and the red boxes underneath are the things that make up and affect that balance. So let's meet today's boxes. First, and sometimes foremost, we have war and conflict. This can be positive, but usually not. And when taken in large doses, it can overbalance the system and lead to other bad things. Second, and also sometimes foremost, we have government. Like war, this can have two faces. If the system is efficient and not corrupt, then a culture can flourish. Take Rome, for example. When there was a good emperor, everyone was happy. But when the emperor was insane, not everyone was happy. There's government for you. The third red box is profit. This is usually beneficial. The economy makes sense, there's a middle class that works, cash can flow, it's all good stuff. Generally speaking, when a country is making money, it's not a bad thing. Resources, which is also kind of foremost, are things like food, water, clothing, fuel, basically everything that a person needs to survive. Generally speaking, again, if there are enough of these, there's a civilization. Monopolies are related to resources in the way that if not everybody has enough, it's usually because there's a monopoly in the way. Lastly, there is unity. Unity, my personal favorite, is when a people are cohesive as a country, when the population is proud and patriotic. Unity is important. So now that you've met our red boxes, let's see them in action, with what a perfect civilization would look like. Wrong side. With profit, there is an economy. Everybody has enough resources, the people are cohesive or unified, and the government is not corrupt. The scale tips to the right. it should be noted that this has never happened. In every nation, country, book club, empire ever, there have been flaws. Sometimes big flaws. Let's see what happens when these flaws take over and flood the system. Here, there's too much war. Monopolies are restricting the lower classes, and the government, like usual, is corrupt. The scale tips to the left. That is all bad. So now that you understand how this scale system of mine works, let's see it in action. Here's where I start to sound clever. Applying old civilizations to this thing is easy. Let's start with Rome at its height. Again, wrong side. Rome always seemed to be making money right up until the very end, so profit goes on the positive side. Not everybody was rich, but most people had enough resources, so that's over there too. The people were also very unified in Rome, especially under a good emperor. And speaking of good emperors, I have put government over there as well, because I'm assuming that there is a good emperor. However, Rome was almost always at war, and some wealthy businessmen have in the past tried to steal from the peasants, so monopolies goes on the negative side as well. But all in all, Rome was stable, and stability is important. But then, everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Not really, but things did change. There was too much war, combined with a series of stupid emperors, and those pesky businessmen didn't go away. And then, this is the first example of how to use my not-so-sliding scale of civilizations. The next one is the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, which fell back in the 90s, my third favorite decade. But let's go to the USSR at its height. The USSR always seemed to have enough resources, much like Rome, from oil fields to farmlands. The people were also very consolidated or unified in the USSR. There was also money in the system, albeit in a socialist form. Government goes in the middle of the scale because the Communist Party was very strong and could head a nation well, but was also very monopolistic and was in its own elite class. As a side note, I have purposely ignored monopolies because they don't mix very well with socialism. But enough with that, let's get to the bad stuff. There was always conflict going on, whether it was World War II or the Cold War. And now we must return to the 90s, where the government of the USSR starts to fail, resources and money are being sucked away from the people who need it, and on the topic of unity, right now the ex-USSR is 15 separate countries. Unity failed a lot. So, what do you think of my little speech so far? Amazing? Life-changing? Eye-opening? Pointless? Well, if you think pointless, I can change that really fast. Let's talk about not the USSR, but the USA. Where are we now, and where will we be going in the near future? Well, to find the future, we must first find the past. 200 years ago, in the era of good feelings, not much was wrong with the 50-year-old states. Nobody even ran against President James Madison, for his second term as president. This was also the time period when the 4th of July became popular to celebrate. Those two things show that the people were happy and unified. The only real problem with this time period was the occasional union on strike. This was the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and not all the factory owners were being very nice to the factory workers. But aside from that, this was perhaps the best time to be an American. The thing that ended this happy time was, of course, politics. Some political parties got mad at each other, and then there was a little bit of an economic crisis, and those two things helped make everybody angry again. But getting back to the point, where are we now compared to 200 years ago? Well, we have enough resources, for now at least, that's not a huge worry, and despite our almost $18 trillion debt, there is money circulating around one of the best infrastructures in the world. Government goes a little bit closer to the middle than usual on the scale, because it is, well, you know this better than I do. And, well, at least it's stable, and that's more than some countries can say. But let's talk about the problems. The longest war in American history was, and continues to be, Afghanistan. To quote Sun Tzu, there is no such instance as a nation benefiting from prolonged warfare. The war has taken its toll on us. The other major problem in today's society, or one of them, is wealth inequality. No offense to Bill Gates, or anybody in the audience, but when the top 5% of the population controls 95% of the wealth, something is wrong. But what's even worse than negative $18 trillion, wealth inequality, and the war in the Middle East combined, is that we're losing what made us the United States in the first place, our patriotism. We're losing our unity. We are no longer one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We are a diverse mishmash in which nobody living on the streets can at all relate to somebody living in suburbia. But have hope. We have come back from the brink of disaster before. Abraham Lincoln held together a nation that was literally at war with itself. And Teddy Roosevelt cut down on monopolies and led us out of World War II and into World War II and out of the Great Depression without missing a beat. What we need today is a leader that can lead as well as those two presidents did. Abe and Teddy were both had wars to focus on, problems to solve, and were assassinated while president. But ignoring that small, slight little detail on the side, they were both amazing leaders. What we need today, as I have already said, is a leader that can top both of them. If I were a politician, then I would have some fancy, expensive, and in the end, not all that effective plan for going forwards, but I don't. So I will instead challenge the politicians that already exist to help prevent this nation of the people, by the people, for the people, from perishing from the earth. Thank you.